Have you ever wondered why some people can enjoy a glass of wine or play a video game casually, while others struggle with compulsive use of substances and behaviors despite negative consequences? Well, hello and welcome. My name is Xochitl Diaz, and today I want to talk about addiction and its connection to physiological psychology. As a mother of two children, one of them being a teenager, I am interested in learning and researching addiction. As a professional that has worked in substance abuse prevention and control programs, and a student pursuing a law enforcement and forensic psychology career, I am aware of the significant impact that addiction has or can have on individuals and their family. Addiction is a complex behavioral process that involves both genetic and environmental factors, and it can have severe consequences on a person's life, including physical and mental health, relationships, and career. In this TED Talk, I will discuss the biopsychology of addiction, including the neuroanatomical pathways and functions involved in this process, and present research informed recommendations for addressing this issue. Addiction is a behavioral process that involves a compulsive use of substances or engagement in a behavior despite the negative consequences. It is a chronic and relapsing disorder that affects the brain's reward system, leading to development of tolerance and withdrawal symptoms. Addiction can involve substances such as drugs, alcohol, or nicotine, as well as behaviors such as gambling, gaming, and internet use. Historically, addiction has been viewed as a moral failing or lack of willpower. However, advances in physiological psychology have shown that addiction is a complex disorder that involves changes in the brain's structure and function. Current approaches to addiction focus on understanding the biological, psychological, and physiological, and also the social factors that contribute to the development and maintenance of addiction. This approach has led to the development of evidence-based treatments such as medication-assisted therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and motivational interviewing. For example, James et al. In 2020 conducted an fMRI study on attentional bias for smoking-related cues and identified that specific neural substances associated with smoking addiction. These findings highlight the importance of considering the neurobiological underpinnings of addiction when developing treatment approaches. The neuroanatomical pathways and functions involved in addiction are complex and involve several areas of the brain, receptors, and neurotransmitters. The reward system of the brain, which include the ventral tegmental area or VTA, the nucleus accumbens or NAC, and the prefrontal cortex or PFC, play a significant role in addiction. The VTA is responsible for the release of dopamine. This is a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward. Research has shown that addiction is associated with changes in the functions and connective of the VTA, the NAC, and the PFC. For example, Vogno et al. In 2016 found that individuals with addiction have reduced dopamine receptors availability in their stratum, which contributes to the increase of motivation drug seeking. The NAC is involved in the regulation of motivation and reward, while the PFC is responsible for executing functions such as decision making, planning, or self control. Alterations in the connective between the VTA and the NAC have also been observed in individuals with addiction, which may contribute to the development of the tolerance and the withdrawal symptoms that are experienced. Let's jump now into a quick example. Now that you have explored the neurobiological aspect of addiction, let's pause for a moment and see if you can test your knowledge. I'm going to describe a scenario and I want you to think about which brain region is primarily involved with this particular addiction related process. Are you ready? Here we go. Picture this scenario. Imagine that you are a person who is struggling with decision making and finding it difficult to resist the urge of engaging in an addictive behavior, despite knowing the negative consequences that it may bring. Which region of the brain do you think is primarily responsible for executing the functions of decision making and self control? Take a few minutes, take a few seconds to think about it, and when you're ready, just say the response out loud. I'll give you a few minutes. All right, great responses. The brain region that is responsible for executive functions such as decision making and self control is the prefrontal cortex, or the PFC. This region helps us weigh the pros and cons, make rational choices, and exert in self control over impulsive behavior. Impairments in the PFC can make it challenging for individuals with addiction to resist the urge of engaging in addictive behavior, even when they understand completely the negative consequences that it may involve. So, understanding the involvement of the prefrontal cortex and other brain regions in addiction can guide us to developing targeted interventions that aim to strengthen the executive functions and enhance self control. Now, let's continue exploring the fascinating world of addiction and its impacts on our brains and behavior. Peer-reviewed research has provided a valuable insights into neurobiological mechanisms underlying addiction. Studies have shown that addiction is associated with changes in the brain reward system, including the alterations of the function, including the alterations in function and connective of the VTA and the NAC and the PFC. Additionally, in a study from 2016 by Full Known ETL, they found that reduced dopamine receptors availability in the sternum of individuals with addiction suggest that alterations in dopamine signals contribute to the dysregulated reward process observed in addiction. Other studies have shown that addiction is associated with changes in the connective between the VTA and the NAC, which may contribute to the development of tolerance and withdrawal symptoms. By studying the neuroanatomical pathways and functions involved in addiction, researchers are aiming to deepen our understanding of the underlying mechanisms in identifying potential targets for intervention and treatment. Overall, the integration of peer-reviewed research into understanding of addiction enhances our knowledge of the neurobiological basis of addiction and informs the development of the effective treatment approaches. By considering findings from peer review studies, we can refine and tailor the interventions to target specific neurobiological pathways functions implicated into addiction. Based on the research, um, there are several recommendations that can be made to address addiction. First, prevention programs should focus on reducing uh, the risk factors such as stress, trauma, and social isolation, and increase instead the protective factors such as social support and coping skills. For instance, Cadet and Krasnova in 2015 found that stress and trauma can interact with the neurotoxics of methamphetamine, leading to the increase of vulnerability to addiction. Providing intervention that addresses stress management and trauma recovery can therefore be can therefore be valuable in preventing addiction. Second, trauma programs should be evidence-based and individualized to address each unique person's needs with addiction. Guerra, Juan Lopez, and Rechamedani in 2019 highlighted the importance of considering the motivational and reward system in alcohol use disorders, tailoring the treatment to approach to target those specific neurobiological mechanisms that can enhance the treatment outcomes. This can include utilizing behavioral therapies that address motivation and reward process, as well as incorporating pharmacological interventions when appropriate, of course. Third, recovery should be viewed as a lifelong process that requires ongoing support and monitoring. James et al. In 2020 conducted an fMRI study on attention bias for smoking-related cues and identified neural substances associated with smoking addiction. Their findings emphasize the importance of long-term support and maintenance abstinence, providing an aftercare program, um, relapse prevention strategies, and ongoing therapeutic support can assist individuals in sustaining their recovery and maintaining cravings or relapse triggers. It is essential to consider the ethical implications and limitations of biological research when making recommendations for addiction. For example, some treatments, such as medication assisted therapy, may not be appropriate for all individuals, and there may be individuals with differences in responses to the treatment. It is crucial to consider factors such as medical history, co-occurring disorders, and potential interactions between medication and substance abuse uh, when determining the stability of specific treatments. Additionally, individuals um, individuals who are neurodivergent or have mental health challenges may face unique barriers to treatment, such as stigma and lack of access to resources. It is important to address these disparities and enhance the treatment programs to include accessibility to these individuals with diverse backgrounds and needs. This can involve implementing cultural competence trainings for healthcare providers or improving outreach efforts to marginalized population and advocating for policy changes to promote equitable access to addiction treatment and support services. In conclusion, addiction is a complex behavior that involves both genetic and environmental factors, affecting the reward and the motivation system in the brain. While addiction can have devastating consequences, the advances in biopsychology provide us with a better understanding of the neuroanatomical pathways and functions involved in this process. By integrating those research findings into practical recommendations and considering all ethical considerations and research limitations, we can develop a more effective addiction treatment and prevention approach. Continued research efforts are essential to further and refine our understanding of addiction and develop it into interventions. By adopting a collaborative and comprehensive approach, we can improve the well-being and quality of life of individuals impacted by addiction and their loved ones as well. Together, we can work towards a society that promotes recovery, supports individuals in overcoming addiction, and reduce the stigma associated with this complex disorder. Thank you for your attention.